Welcome. This is John Ecken with Tandem Solution. I want to shoot a short video blog today to kind of look at some of the things that organizations who are going to roll Power BI out to the whole enterprise should look at, and a couple of ways that they can actually do distributed data for Power BI throughout the enterprise. So we're going to look at four quick things. We're going to talk real quickly about some enterprise licensing options. We're going to look at the different roles that your organization might have for Power BI. Talk about a couple of the organizational guidelines configurations that the enterprise should definitely look at when rolling out to everyone, and then look at a couple of different ways that we can do distributed data modeling for the enterprise. So the first thing we're going to look at really quick is just enterprise licensing options. So we know that Power BI comes in three different flavors. We've got the free version, which really works well for small businesses that typically are going to just import some data to a report, put it up into the cloud service. Works well, but really not designed for large enterprise organizations. We've got Power BI Pro, which is about $10 a month per user. Really get a lot of features, a lot of functionality out of that. But just make sure you do understand that anyone that is going to consume reports that use those features are going to be required to have a pro license. And then we have the Power BI Premium, which really goes into effect probably about 500 plus users. Is where the cost starts to be effective, where you can actually assign different levels of licensing to your users based on their function. So whether or not they're a report generator, data steward, or just a consumer of those reports. That also gives you the ability to bring the Power BI service on premise through the Power BI report server. Okay, let's quickly look at some of the roles that you might want to have for your organization when you're rolling Power BI out. These roles are not necessarily always going to be one person per role. Certain roles will have many people that accomplish those roles. Other roles, you might have one person that's does two or three of these roles. So I've broken these down in just a couple different categories. So we have Power BI administrators. These are going to be the people that really control what capabilities and functionality the enterprise is going to have with Power BI. Primarily, these people will be the ones that will be in the Power BI portal in the admin section and can go in and control things like tenant settings. So they can look at, can we share content with external users? Can we publish to the web? Can we print? Not looking at all these, but can we go through and use ArcGIS? Do we have R capabilities? They might go in and put in different organizational visuals, so visuals that they like or they feel that the whole organization could find useful. They could put those in. They can go in and control embedded codes and delete codes if they did allow external sharing. So again, this user really is kind of the high-end administrator that's kind of the steward for Power BI and is really controlling the whole kind of setup for the organization, gateways, things like that. You probably might have a separate security administrator. This could be someone that's also in charge of your Office 365 security. They would be in charge of probably giving users access to Power BI, but then also creating your workspaces, groups, apps, things like that, and making sure that the appropriate people are placed into those groups to consume data. Data stewards are going to be pretty much the owners of the data. So as we begin Power BI and we start allowing people to access our information, we definitely need someone that's kind of in charge of the data. This is real important, especially if you're in organizations, healthcare, places like that that have government regulations. The data stewards kind of are the ones that need to be responsible to say, hey, yes, that's okay for that to be used, or no, that can't be published to that particular group because of security rights. We might have a whole team of data modelers. It's one of the things we're going to look at here in just a second, that you might have a lot of users that can be really good at building reports, and they know what they want on the reports. They're good at pulling the report information in, changing the graphs, things like that. But the modeling of a report is a little bit more complex. It requires some knowledge of things like DAX. It requires knowledge of some of the business processes that we need, how data is related to each other, where the data comes from. So it is very possible as we grow this out to the enterprise that you have specific people that are going to be modeling that data and then allowing other people to create reports off of those data models. And in a second, we're going to look at a couple different options for that. Report creators, publishers, again, this is just people that do actually build the reports. So they go in, design the reports, design the dashboards, design how many pages, design mobile reports, things like that, and then actually publish them out into the Power BI service. Again, could be the same person as the data modeler, could be a separate person. And then you also have consumers. Obviously, this is probably your largest group of individuals in an organization. So they're using the reports, they're pulling them up on their mobile devices, they're making business decisions. Some of those report consumers will have nothing to do with the creation. They won't know where the data comes from. They're just simply, hey, I need access and I need to be able to look at that report and do something with it. Next thing we're going to do is look at some of the things that before you roll this out to your organization, some of the guidelines and configuration settings that your organization should think of and decide how to handle. Now, some of these we looked at a second ago, or we showed the admin portal that would go in, but these are kind of things that you want to kind of look at and say, okay, if we're going to roll this out to our organization, what are some of the things that we want to make sure we get done and get set up first before we just give everybody access to this. So you do want to look at the configuration. You do want to decide, are we going to let external sharing take place? Are we going to use the cloud? Are we going to bring things on premise? Do we have any restrictions on exporting and printing? Are we going to set up an enterprise gateway? How are refreshes going to work? Are we going to set up, scheduled refreshes at certain times at night? Are we going to let anybody just, as a published report, go in and configure their refreshes? A lot of that will come down to, are you going to have any type of analysis services or something like that in place where you're going to control the refresh of that data at all times? How are you going to segment your users? What workspaces do you need? What applications do you need? How do you make sure that people are given access to things that they should have and not have access to things that they shouldn't have? Are you going to let users, any policies on actual personal workspaces? Once you give them access, is it pretty much, hey, everybody go out, publish what you want, and do what you want with it? And again, the key to that is we want our data available to our users so that they can make good decisions on that data, but we also have to protect our data to ensure that it's not leaked somewhere that it shouldn't be. And then also just data distribution. I like to tell organizations that, hey, Power BI is such a great product, but if you give it to somebody without them really knowing, what to do with it or what they're allowed to do with it, it can be chaotic. So, things like, do we prefer to do import versus direct connections or live connections to data? And kind of give some guidelines to users of when they should or shouldn't use a certain type of connection. Are there approved data locations? Are there certain areas that are approved to go to the cloud versus that are approved to go to on-premise if you're doing an on-premise install? Again, just how does that work? How are we going to handle data security? Are we going to use any type of row level security? Are we going to, again, publish all our data to a warehouse, put it on something like, again, analysis services, or maybe we're going to build a data lake or use Hadoop, something like that. So again, the more that you go into this with some predefined guidelines and configurations, it's a lot easier for you to kind of look to your users and say, okay, this is what we're trying to accomplish. Okay, let's look at 3 different ways that we can actually do some data model and distribution in Power BI. By no means are these the only 3 ways to do it, just 3 ways that I'm going to look at today. So the first way is going to be using Power BI templates. The second is to use a Power BI data source, and then the last is to have some modeling done in SQL Server Analysis Services. All 3 of these ways the modeling has already been completed. So this would be scenarios where someone actually did modeling of the data and then made those models available to other individuals in the organization to actually write the reports. A Power BI template is a kind of a neat way to do some data distribution. Now, I typically look at this for a situation where, okay, I'm going to go out and potentially maybe I have some franchises that I want to be able to build score reports and kind of send and say, okay, to the franchise, okay, here's a template. I've already modeled the data. You can put in a parameter so that you can narrow it down to just your franchise. And then it already has some pre-built reports inside of it, or you can use that model to build more reports. So it works real well. In this particular situation, though, you've got to remember that you are giving the kind of the data back to the user. So once they use this template, they're going to be able to actually go out and build and do everything else they want to do with the data. They kind of own it at that time. So I've created a template. So I've got a mock kind of lemonade stand organization that has multiple lemonade stands inside of it. And so you can see here I've got a lemonade sales model location, and I got a template, which is a PBIT file. Okay, and the difference is this has the complete structure to it, but does not contain any data. When you do use these templates, whoever opens up the template, they will have to have the rights to make a connection to the data, depending on where your data is. If it's in a SQL database, they'll have to have that type of account. If it's an Excel spreadsheet, they'll have to have access to the location where that Excel spreadsheet is. So I'm going to open this template. What you're going to notice about this template right away is that it's asking me for a parameter. And so this is one of the cool things about the templates, is that I can build a data model that maybe is reusable in a lot of different places. And by just putting in the parameter, that will cause it to load the data just for that particular location or whatever we're doing. So I'm going to put in a 2 here. I'm going to go ahead and hit load. You can see it is now actually going out and retrieving that data from the database at this point in time. Again, I'm connecting to a database I've already connected to, so it's not prompting me for credentials, but it would if it's never connected to that database before. And that's important because obviously you don't want your credentials embedded into the template. And then we can see here now that it's actually has pulled my data down. It has generated my report for location 2. You will notice that it's an untitled Power BI desktop report. So that just means that it's not been saved. So the template, just like open up a Word template, Excel template, anything like that, all it's doing is setting up the defaults for your report. It's up to you now to save it. But we will see that my model is created. So I can go in, click on my relationships tab. I see everything that's there. I see the model. I see any measures. Anything like that that was created in the model is there and available, but it is completely accessible through this template, meaning, hey, I didn't want that field hidden, and they can unhide it for us inside of our report. So templates are a really good way. Again, I see them more at a departmental level or a kind of a franchise type situation where you want to get that data out to people, but you kind of want to let them have the ownership of that once you give it to them. Second thing we're going to look at is using a Power BI data source. Now, a Power BI data source allows someone to model a Power BI source. So they can go in again, connect to SQL, connect to Excel, connect to whatever it is that they want to get the data from, and completely model that data so that it's usable by all organizations. And then they can publish that model up into the Power BI service. Now, what that allows then is anybody that is a member of the group that the Power BI data model has been published to can then turn around and build additional reports off of that model. I see this as a really good fit, maybe not for the whole enterprise, but maybe more at like departmental levels, where, okay, I might be the sales department, and we go in and we create a model that's really specific to sales. And we put that into, again, an application group so that all the sales team can be part of, or the sales managers maybe are part of, and they're able to go out and pull that model in and actually do some reporting on their own without having to worry about the actual modeling characteristics that are there. I think it works really well. So let's take a quick look at how that works. So again, I got an empty Power BI report here. I'm going to go up here to get data, and I'm going to choose, just quickly go to online services, and you see I've got a data source called Power BI service. So I'm going to hit connect here. Again, I've already logged in and everything, so it's not prompting me to do anything there. And then I can see in my workspace, I've got a set of models that are available to me. This is my test instance, so I got a lot of different stuff up here. I'm going to choose that Lemonade sales model, which is the same model that we just looked at for the template, and we're going to hit load. And you're going to see a couple of quick changes. Again, our model comes down, so we have access to everything in that model. But you'll notice over here on the left-hand side that the actual data viewer and the relationship tab goes away. So in this instance, I've got the model now, and I can do whatever I want to do with this model. So let's say I want to pull in products, and I want to look at quantity sold of those products. Let's put that into a pie chart. Real simple visualization there. But you notice I've got full access to that model, but I have no ability to change a lot of the characteristics of that model. So if I click on, let's say even unit cost, I go to modeling, you'll notice almost all of my buttons here are grayed out. I do have the ability to create new measures. So that is still a very nice feature that even though I've got the model down, it will allow me to build my own measures on top of that model for my specific report. I have access to all measures that are already in the report also. So that's the second way to do it. Again, I think this is a really good way to distribute data, but still control things like refreshes. And again, I take away some of the complexity. The last thing I want to look at is using something like SQL Server Analysis Services. Again, in this situation, somebody went out and built this model. So in this situation, we'll look at analysis services. Now, analysis services, you could have used an Azure cloud version of analysis services. You could have an on-premise version. There's a lot of different options there. But we're going to see a similar thing that we just saw with the distributed model up in the Power BI service. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to say I want to connect to analysis services database. Now, I'm just connecting to my local service, and at this time I'm going to do a live connect. For those that don't understand the difference, a live connect means that I'm not going to pull the data into my report. I'm essentially going to query that data as I need it from the analysis services, which uses a really good data engine to really, typically quickly give me the data that I need. So I'm going to hit OK here. I'm going to choose again my Lemonade sales model, and we're going to go ahead and hit OK. And again, you're going to see something really, really similar to what occurs. I lose my data view and my relationship tabs here over on the side. I see my model here, and again, I can pull it in. This model is just a tad different than before, but you can see very similar. I can pull, say, product name in. I can pull in quantity sold, and I can go back and change that to my pie chart again. So again, little different model, but same data that we're looking at and same results. I'm using Live Connect, so as soon as I need some data, if I want to pull in, say, some daily weather stuff, say precipitation, let's look at that over a line chart. It's querying analysis services right then and there. So click on Lemonade cell and kind of say, okay, how does that line up to precipitation levels? We can click there, and again, whenever it needs data to complete, it's pulling that data in based on a direct query to analysis services. Those are just 3 ways of kind of doing distributed data. There's a lot of other options out there, but I feel that in a enterprise approach, if you really want to get the most out of Power BI and you really want to have a large number of people consuming, especially if you're buying premium and you're paying for a ton of licenses, um, some of the best way to do that is to get that data in an already pre-built configuration model, so that people can really just come in and pull that data out and consume it and use that data effectively.